Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hi everyone, Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Super excited today because we're having a conversation about communication. Now, when it comes to communication, we all understand the importance of choosing the right words and using frameworks and all those other really important elements. But one of the things we don't talk about that often is how to use your voice, specifically to enhance the reception of the message that you're trying to convey. Now, my guest today is Maria Pellicano, and she's got an incredible pedigree as a singer, as a voice coach, and she's really effective at helping people communicate really, really well so their message is received in the way it's intended. And of course, understanding how to use your voice to influence certain interactions and scenarios. It's a wide-ranging interview, and you'll get a lot from it. If you take this information and apply it, your communication skills will definitely improve. And Maria shares some really practical things you can do to enhance that. Now, on another note, I'm really excited to let you know about the Scaling Summit, which we've just launched. And if you want to head across to scalingsummit.com, you can find out more information there. But just as a quick overview, Scaling Summit is about helping you make the transition from being self-employed, having a job in a sense in your own business, to having a truly leveraged business, one that gives you not just money, but also time and meaning. So you've got scalability and leverage there. Well, we're going to be covering a heap of things. We're going to be talking about strategy. We're going to be talking about how to create a self-managing team, building scalable infrastructure and assets, and of course, how to implement things really quickly and effectively to get the job done. We've got a huge array of guest speakers. We've got Steve Waugh, the former Australian cricket captain, coming to share his tips and tricks around leadership and getting the most out of a team. We've got Nove Kashyap coming to talk about strategy. We've got another couple of really big-name speakers that we're going to announce in a couple of weeks, certainly well-known in the general business population and community, that are going to be sharing their techniques and strategies about scaling up across multiple locations. We've got a heap of things there, but as I said, head across to scalingsummit.com and you can find out more information. But for now, let's get on to our conversation with Maria Pellicano. Here she is. Maria Pellicano, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the Savvy Dentist podcast. How are you today?
I'm good, and thank you for having me here, Jess.
It's wonderful to have you here. Actually, I've been looking forward to talking to you for a long period of time. I've been familiar with your work for quite a while now through various other sources. But I'm really curious to ask you, in the work that you do with voice and voice coaching, how did you find your way into that role? Because that's quite an unusual role that you have.
Yeah, well, look, I started off purely just singing. But I must say, coming from an Italian background, speaking was very important. And I grew up in an environment where, I did go to church and we'd have our speakers speaking 4 times a week. And I'd get up and speak as a teenager and share on an idea or a subject. So perhaps the public presentation was with me from very young. So whether it was in my home in an Italian family or it was in my local community church, we were always getting up and speaking in youth groups and also playing music. And that was the platform that enabled me to be comfortable with being in front of people. And I am very grateful for those times. But I did have a natural tendency to want to be in front of people. That kind of leadership role does require a sense of leadership, so standing up and singing or speaking. So as a child, I've been doing it for many years. And then I ended up becoming a singing teacher, and then I became a coach, not just a teacher, but a coach, enabling people to feel the confidence behind what they were doing and the ownership. So there wasn't just about singing a song or speaking out, but really connecting with your soul in what you were saying. And I was looking at what those barriers were, how come some people were better at it than others, started getting into personality profiling, things like Enneagram profiling, extended disc profiling, certified as a coach twice over the last 25 years, really trying to understand human behavior and what was going on. So then it could become more congruent and that there was more power and a sense of influence when the person did use their voice.
That's really interesting. And there's lots of, lovely threads of conversation I'd like to pick up and run with there for a moment because,
Sure.
and I'll probably circle back to a few a bit later on, but you mentioned the word congruence and you mentioned the word power and you mentioned, the ability to convey a message rather than just speak words. So I want to ask you, why is it that using your voice as an instrument, using your voice not just to speak words, is so important? Is it about that element of getting the message understood correctly? Why is it so important?
Okay. For me, it's about being creative with your voice. See, the voice is a creative force. Voice creates moods, it creates change, it influences new ideas, depending on how it's communicated. The way you use your voice can either be influential or it can be completely the opposite, a dead end.
So you mentioned that you can use your voice to create moods. Can you consciously change your mood with your voice? Can you, if you change your voice, will your mood follow after the fact? Is that what you're saying?
If we own what we say,
yeah,
and we're passionate about what we say, and we're mindful of who we're speaking to, connected to the person and the purpose of what we're saying mindfully, then we are able to really influence change or communicate a message, whatever it is that you're wanting to communicate in the first place. But if you're being sloppy and you don't think that what you say or don't feel that what you say is going to be heard or it's important, and you have an attitude about your voice that it's powerless, then that is how it comes across.
That's really interesting. One of the things that I talk to my wife about a lot, Maria, is I feel that a lot of people go through life without intention in the way that they communicate. Now, I tend to focus largely on the words that are chosen to convey a message, but of course the words are only a small part of the communication story. And what I'm hearing you say is that bringing intention to the way that you use your voice, bringing intention and coupling that with the words that you choose, you can be on point, you can communicate effectively, you can make sure that your message is received in the way that you're intending it to be. Have I understood you correctly there?
Yeah. I mean, it's about really knowing your personal power and what you're here to say. A lot of us are rolling up to jobs, to life, almost not owning it. So there's no sense of passion. There's no sense of, I know that I can make a difference. I'm here for a reason. We don't hear that enough. We don't feel that enough. So we don't speak like that. We don't speak intentionally. We don't speak on purpose. We just, go about our business as if it doesn't matter what we say because nobody's going to hear us. Maybe that's because as children we didn't have that sense of purpose. Maybe we weren't heard as kids. Maybe what we said wasn't important. Who am I anyway? I mean, who's going to listen to me? So it goes back, really does stem back to your own self-esteem, your own self-purpose.
Yeah. It reminds me, actually, sorry, I was listening to Cat Stevens the other day. I don't know if you like Cat Stevens at all, the singer. But he's got a song, just on the spur of the moment, I've forgotten the title of the song, but from the moment I could talk, I was ordered to listen. And so perhaps, as kids, we're kind of constantly being told to be quiet. So we don't understand the power of our voice. We don't understand the influence and impact that it can have. So I suspect you're onto something there. I wanted to ask you about different voices for different scenarios or different circumstances. Can you walk me through what sort of scenarios or circumstances you might need to bring a different voice to?
Well, let's say the person you're speaking to is distressed. If you're going to use a voice tone that is not acknowledging that and that sounds selfish in some way, that it's about your point versus the other person's need to be heard. So there's a lot of people that speak to us in a way that they actually want to be heard. They're not really listening to you. They want you to acknowledge them. So voice is about communication. And it's about empathy. And so it's such a big subject because the way you feel, your belief systems and how integrated you are with others and mindful will affect the tone you use. Now, some of us actually don't have a lot of choice on that because we don't exercise our voice. So it gets locked into a muscle memory. So some people have a monotone and they sound the same way all the time, whether they're being compassionate or angry, it's always the same sound. And that is a muscle memory around voice. So therefore, voice coaching for speaking would be useful. That's where I provide the 4 sessions, at least an introduction to being able to modulate your voice with just a few exercises that you do and awareness of variety in your tone, because it is a muscle memory. And we not that we're born with it, but we pick it up from our parents, whoever was the most dominant leader in our household. If it was dad's voice or mum's voice, that actually locks in as a memory. So sometimes we absolutely don't have choice physically. And then other times we're just not attuned to the emotions that the limbic system, the nervous limbic system, actually triggers the larynx and calibrates the vocal cords in different ways. So if you are connected to your emotions, it could be quite natural to go, hey, what happened, or hey, I'm really, really sorry. And again, to get those changes is by connecting to our emotions. So there's two aspects. I mean, is my voice physically locked into one style, which is that typical monotone or repetitive patterns that people feel like they're always sounding the same. So I get inquiries about that. People tell me I sound like this. Unawareness of my own voice sound, because I never listen to recordings. I don't take advice and I don't really care. Or the other aspect is, am I mindful of what the emotions are here, empathetic? Can I connect to the emotion here of what's been said and move the voice with that? So there's two things going on. And that's why my programs have two things. The physical, just voice coaching. Let's give you some choice. Let's increase your menu so you can choose more tones. Or let's connect to emotions and let's identify some. Let's become more empathetic. Let's learn about emotional aspects that can affect the way you communicate, and ultimately it changes your voice tone.
Yeah, I think that's really important, isn't it? Because if you can get that right, your message will be conveyed well. And I've got a teenage daughter, and I've got two teenage daughters actually, but one of them in particular at the moment is going through the whatever stage, and there's that big difference in, whatever and whatever. And
how old is she? Is she 14? Because I have a 14-year-old.
She's 15. She's 15. And,
oh, dear. So.
Yeah, I know. Well, maybe I should introduce my daughter to yours and they can roll their eyes collectively at us. But the point that I think is really interesting around that is the tonality, and because you can say the same words and convey totally different meanings. So getting that right is going to be key. What I wanted to ask you around as well is, because we've spoken about the tone of voice, but we haven't really spoken about the pace of speech,
sure.
the use of pauses and so on. So can you walk us through, please, a little bit about how to use not just the tone, but the pace, pauses, and other elements that you think might be useful to create the voice of communication or the style of communication you're trying to achieve?
Sure. So voice is connected to your heartbeat. So if your heart's beating really fast, you tend to speak fast. Well, that's how it is for me, and that's what I've noticed. And on the other hand, if you're a deep thinker, you tend to just really pause too much, or perhaps it just doesn't flow as much because the thinking is interrupting the flow. So it's a bit of both. There's a bit of just respecting space in between sentences, perhaps, or even words, that we're comfortable with the space. So if you really think about it, when we're reading words, it's the space that allows us to identify the words. It's not the words, it's the space. So space is powerful because it allows us to collect the energy of that word, the meaning, and so on. On the other hand, if you have too much space, it can be too slow for some personality types. So I would suggest there that you need a pace that is going. So depending who you're speaking to, there are different 4 energy types of people out there. And I'm always looking for who is that type and what do I need to do. But always, I think it's useful to use your jaw, your tongue, your mouth fully to pronounce words well, particularly if you're going to go fast, that you move your tongue quickly so you don't become mumbly and fast-paced to a point where we're not understanding you because you're mumbling. Not only are you going fast, I do want the information, tell me as quickly as you can because I haven't got that much time, But on top of it, I need to understand you clearly. So pace, depending on the person you're speaking to and what it is that you're talking about, is important. I mean, if you want to give an instruction, I would slow it down because it brings more importance to it. And everything's like, I've told you this before. I'm not going to tell you again.
Might just record that for my 15-year-old. Sorry to my lovely daughter who's listening, who's going to listen to this and go, oh, Dad. But I think that's really important. What about if we were to have a scenario then? I want to step you into the life and times of being a dentist. If you've got a patient that's in front of you, let's say that patient is perhaps anxious in this instance, and I'll perhaps throw another scenario in a minute. What sort of tone and pace might you use with someone who's anxious?
Well, first of all, when somebody's anxious, feel that for a moment. You don't disregard it. Oh, here we go again, another anxious person. Because, look, dentists, right, you're working with a lot of dentists, is that right, Jess?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are really scared about their mouth and their teeth. Yep. I know my husband is. He's extremely nervous. I had to prep up the dentist before he walked in the door. And my husband's only gone back because this dentist has identified his emotion.
Yeah.
Has taken the time to do that. And he will not go back to somebody that doesn't.
Isn't that great?
So it's just as bad as public speaking. So for a moment, if you all singing a song, let me say, Jess, I mean, if I said to you, would you like to get up and sing a song? You'd say, no way.
Yeah,
so
I
you
would.
You already mentioned you wouldn't do it. So not to ask you to do it. But it's just the same. There are people not wanting to walk into dental clinics and it scares them. I can tell you now that my husband will sweat and so he perspires. He doesn't sleep the night before. That's how extreme it was. Obviously, something happened to him when he was a child in a dental clinic somewhere.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to say is identify the emotion, sympathize, and have that empathy to actually go, I'm hearing you, I feel what you're saying. You're not going to be able to solve it, but what you can do is connect with it. And I tell the person, let them know by your voice, because it'll be slower paced, I would say, and a little bit breathy, not so harsh. So I would speak in a nurturing way, something more breathy, and say, okay, Jess, I've heard, I can feel what you're feeling. It's okay. I'm going to do my best. You can let me know. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I'll slow down. I'll stop. Just more breathy tone there and slower paced. Anything fast and harsh and no breath, see, this has got no breath, can sound demanding, scary, pushy, unsympathetic, and not nurturing. And I'm here to get this job done. Just sit on the chair.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so that's really interesting. So, ladies and gents, if you've just tuned in, I'm having a conversation with Maria Pellicano, and she's an expert at voice coaching and helping you communicate effectively through voice. And she's got a ton of things that are helpful for you. I'd really encourage you to check out her site, mariapellicano.com, and check out where she's at there. Maria, I want to ask you a little bit about a different scenario, and perhaps that's where you're dealing with a team member and there's either some conflict between that team member and another team member, or perhaps even there's conflict between you and that team member. And when emotions get involved, it's easy to kind of lose the consciousness of your communication. What sort of strategies would you suggest that people employ when they're dealing with that kind of scenario?
Okay. So when it goes wrong, it's all selfish speaking. Everybody's just taking care of themselves and their own needs. So the voice becomes very selfish. The tone is not really considering other people's tones of voice. Neither is it willing to listen. So it's all about getting my message out there, and I don't care what you say or what you feel. That's the extreme. So it sounds harsh, and there's no emotion in it that's going to be influential. It's just I call it selfish speaking, because it's all about me and my need. But if you're in a team, depending if you're a leader or, you're part of your role is to help the team work together. So at that point, softening the voice is more important listening is going to be more important than speaking. Seek to understand before you're understood.
Yep.
That's the first rule of leadership. I think in a team, we all need to be leaders and listen to each other, because the team is individuals that work for one common goal. So what is the goal, and how do we make this goal move and work? So we need to modulate our voice, take time to respect others. I love the integral theory system, which is spiral dynamics. I love the work of that, which is to understand where people are at in their own personal development. Where are they in their growth? The spiral dynamics talks about those basic archaeal sort of systems through to becoming more aware of others as you go through the levels. And then you lift your level to a conscious level where you become more aware of others. So when it comes to communication, it goes back to belief systems to me. For me, it goes back to beliefs, because the way you communicate is how you believe, and what you believe about humanity, others, yourself, where you're placed in your own personal development. It doesn't matter how many certificates you have on the wall, how many degrees you have, how old you are. Growth, we need to all wake up, we need to grow up, we need to clean up, and then we'll show up. And voice is in showing up. So how does your voice show up? Well, I want to know, are you awake to others around in your team, in your environment, in your business? Are you awake to serving? And, how do you do business? How do you function as a human being? How do we, is this about just me and myself, or is it about being of service to others and so there's this holistic approach to voice, because voice is about showing up, and it's how you show up is how you have woken up and how you grow up and how you clean up. So I don't know if that answers the question, but we need to change our voice depending on who we're speaking to. If we can be bothered, this is the other aspect. If you have a reason to want to do it, and I've got to go back to that. Because why should I change my voice if I don't care about others and I just care about what I want to do and what I need to do?
That's a really good question, isn't it? No, I don't have an answer for that question, to be honest with you.
That's the question. I mean, why would you even bother? I mean, some people aren't even aware of their voice because particularly they don't think it's important. They don't understand that voice is a creative force, and it's the only way we speak to people. How do you speak to people without a voice? My father lost his voice through motor neuron disease.
Oh, wow.
I've watched him in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing he lost. And I've noticed how it's affected his communication. He conveys messages with his hands. But my golly, our voice is so important. You can wake up one day and not have a voice.
Look, again, I could speak for hours about gratitude and being grateful for all the things that we can and do take for granted on, time to time. What I wanted just to shift gear about for a moment, Maria, is because I know you're also in the space of helping other people interpret voice. So if you're speaking to someone, being able to read what's really going on, understanding the feelings behind the message. And I think that's really important, because in dentistry, what happens quite regularly is they'll tell us what they want us to know and know more. Oftentimes in dentistry, we get part of the picture, not the whole picture. And we are looking for ways to try and fill in the blanks to, get a clearer picture or a more complete picture. And, there's lots of things that we can use, such as, gestures and, posture and all those other sorts of things. But I'm curious to understand what someone's voice can tell us. So if we've got patients sitting in the chair talking to us, what sort of telltale things should we be looking for as we go through that conversational process with them?
So it's very intuitive. Now, if you're not coming from that space, you can learn it. So connecting with people's voices is to read beyond words, to feel the meaning behind the words, to look at people's eyes and look at their bodies and connect with that, not just the words. Now, if you're coming from a thinking space, the Enneagram talks about 3 areas of expression: body, heart, and thinking. And I always do profiles on my clients because I want to know what they're up against and what is the growth area. But if you're in your thinking space, and dentists, doctors a lot of them have had to use their thinking all the time, and perhaps they're not always easily functioning in the heart space or in the body space.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, let's do some activities that activate those areas to make you more a holistic speaker and communicator. So what would I do? I would listen very carefully to that person beyond the words, look at their eyes, perhaps, look at their body, connect more heart to heart. Daniel Goleman's work on this is great, emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks particularly in the area of empathy, which is one of the 5. He talks about 3 levels of empathy. There's thinking empathy, there's feeling empathy, and there's sensing empathy. With your child, for example, can you sense when something's going on and they're not talking?
Yeah, I can, for sure.
A mother or a father can feel maybe a child's unwell and they haven't even said they're unwell. So we can tap into maybe a pet. You can look at a pet. I can see my dog, if he doesn't look happy, he hasn't said to me, I'm not happy, can't speak, right? But I can look at his body language. I can look at his eyes. So we can probably communicate from that point, really engaging with those deeper meanings behind what it is that they're saying. And when a person acknowledges that, they think that you're really caring. You're not just a dentist, but you're caring. You've connected with them.
And are there specific cues that we should look out for? When you talk about people who read facial expressions, they'll say, if someone's looking up to the left, they're thinking, if they're looking to all that sort of stuff. So
you can do all that.
Yeah, are there sort of cues and clues that come from the tone of the voice, the pace of the voice, or is there anything there that we should be looking at specifically to try and complete that puzzle?
Well, if they're angry, they're going to have a very stern sound in their voice like this, very tight, very, very like, I don't want this to happen again. There's no way. I'm actually deliberately using my voice this way. I could come in and said, look, my teeth, they're no good now. I've had so much trouble since that last visit, So at that point, you don't want to respond the same way. Now, no, I did my best and that's all I can do, right? You're not going to match it with that. You could counteract it with more like, wow, see, I'm now more breathy. Tell me more about that. What actually happened? See? What actually happened? I've got more breath. So breath in your tone brings heart, right?
Yeah.
Robotic speaking, often when we're just going bang, 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 bang on things, there's a lot of thinking going there. It's very critical. Can be cold. But imagine doing all 3, breathiness as well as, very stern speaking at the same time. So no, I did my best and so I'm actually still, we covered all these areas and then we spoke about this action we're going to take and I'm very sorry that this went this way. So I've got some breath in there, but I'm still very logical in the description. So really listening to things like a stern voice, a breathy voice, like, oh, I can't believe this happened again. I just don't know where to, I don't know what to do. I mean, at that point, I would come in with, I don't know what to do. And I'd say like, okay, why don't you sit down? Let's talk about this. Let's write it down. So now I'm being a little bit stern, but I'm being nurturing. But I'm not saying that, okay, that's enough. Stop it. Sit down. You see where I'm using my voice in different ways? Yeah. So listening to tone,
so
we can all
tone's
tell.
Big
we can. We just need to be awake. We just need to wake up and be alert to meaning in what people say rather than the words.
I think that's, again, really, really important. And, if you've just joined us, we're having a conversation about understanding not just the words, but the way the words are spoken, whether, they're breathy, as you've said, whether there's a tone that conveys another meaning and just being alert to those cues. Because one of the things that I see in practice, and I'm not in, the practice that often these days, but when I am, even still, patients will say things and we get that incomplete picture, and using the tone and trying to interpret what's really going on allows me to make some relatively accurate assumptions about what's going on. Of course, we test those assumptions. We don't want to just presume that they're correct, but it does give some really good cues and clues to what's going on.
Also, Jess, the thing is that what people feel is always the most important thing. So you've got to connect with their feelings because everybody wants their problem solved. They're coming in to get their problem solved. So if you're assuming, so you really need to first connect with where they're at and then bringing in your obviously professional opinion there. The other thing is too that we've got a lot of evidence that doctors in America particularly are getting sued based on their voice tone.
Wow.
Because the voice tone is delivering the information. And there is a lot of voice doctors that are working on their voice tone. If you look it up, doctors being sued in the States based on their voice tone, because the way they deliver the information, let's say if it's something quite critical, the way they deliver it can impact the way the person receives it and then the results they take because of it. Because it can sound very scary or it can sound very positive, like there is an issue here, but we can do this.
Yeah.
Or there's an issue here and this is the end of the road. That's what the voice can deliver.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of research that is very important, particularly in fields of medicine and medical issues, because people are frightened, particularly around the medical, of losing control.
Yeah. So, Maria, we've covered a fair bit of territory over the last, half hour or thereabouts. And I wanted to ask you, if you were to give the audience, one or two or three key things to consider as they go about communicating, using their voice effectively, what would be the one or two things, or how many, that you think are essential that people just need to be conscious of, or even skills to develop, whatever, you think is appropriate?
Okay, so before you speak, think about how you're going to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Tone is always more important than the words themselves. Tone carries the message. You can have the right message with the wrong tone.
Absolutely.
Or you can have sometimes the right tone with the wrong message. So both of them need to work together. And research shows us that the emotional aspect of what we say is way more important than the words themselves.
Yeah.
So that's the first one.
Yep.
Did you say 3, didn't you? Second one?
It can be 2, 3, 4, doesn't matter, just a couple, whatever you think.
Okay. The second one is you can create more options around your voice tone with some voice coaching that's specifically tailored for speakers. If you love to sing, it's even better, because singing, it really opens the whole toolbox even greater.
Mm-hmm.
So work on your voice, create more choices, so then you're not stuck with the same tone over and over, thinking that you are making a difference depending on the conversation, but you're not really, because you've never reviewed a recording. You don't take feedback. Nobody gives you feedback. Maybe people are afraid to give you feedback. There's also that aspect, that maybe you're not getting the feedback because people are afraid to give you the feedback.
Yeah.
So, we can all learn about voice tone. The other thing is not to be afraid to speak from your heart, from the emotion sides. Play with that. Do it with a pet. Do it with a child. Notice how many different voices you can have and what the emotion and the reasoning behind that is. And the second thing is, remember that communication, voice is all about people.
Yep. Yeah.
It's all about delivering a message to people, and they need to get it, not you. We're throwing a ball to somebody for them to catch. We're not throwing the ball, I'm just using this as a metaphor, for the sake of throwing the ball.
No. You're right. The communication is a two-way thing, and how the message is received is just as important, or more important indeed, than how it might have been delivered. So you've got to make sure you're delivering the right way so it's received the right way. Maria, you've been incredibly generous with your time today, and I want to say thank you. From all of us here at Savvy Dentist and all the listeners, you've been really kind, really generous. For those people who are interested in learning how to use their voice better, and I think this is a skill that all of us as dentists really need to be mastering, because we have an element of performance in all that we do, whether it's with our patients, whether it's with our team, and anyone who does any form of public speaking needs to understand the power of their voice. So if you've got anything in that space, I'd really encourage you to check out some coaching with Maria, and you can check out her website at mariapellicano.com. So please do go and have a look at that. We'll put the link in the show notes, of course, but check out getting some training, because I guarantee you that the number one skill in life is the ability to communicate, and voice has a huge role to play in that. It's not just the words. In fact, it's more likely not the words. So do check those resources out. And once again, Maria, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a fun conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jesse. And I appreciate all of your work. And Dr. Jess, isn't it? Dr. Jesse.
Only my grandmother calls me that. Because
I love that.
She was so pleased that we finally had someone with that title in the family, that,
Beautiful.
I was introduced as her grandson, Dr. Jesse, which is really weird.
No, that's lovely. Carries experience and authority, and I feel like I can trust you even more with a DR.
Aren't you lovely? All right, Maria. Well, thank you once again. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jessie Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessiegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist.